Fourscore and about half a billion years ago, I was looking to find a way of playing MP3s in my car because my car only had a tape deck. And I had a CD adapter and could plug it in, and it was like, yay, this is great. I could play some CDs, and that was all fine and dandy. And then I was looking at aftermarket CD players and expansions to play with additional disc changers in the trunk. And the biggest you could get was like 10, but they were ridiculously expensive. And the issue that I kept running into every single time I looked at any of these iterations was, how much music do I have at my disposal? And at the most, you're looking at maybe 10 CDs, which is about 10 to 12 hours of music. And it sounds like a lot, and I know I've been laughed at before when people are like, how long do you plan on driving? But when you look at this from a bigger picture, is if you commute back and forth to work, and you spend about an hour going each way, you're looking at 2 hours a day, which is 10 hours a week. You'd be burning through your entire music collection, or your entire collection that you have in the car, in a week. And then over the weekend, you're gonna have to swap stuff out. And I thought that was just annoying. You have to wait for discs to change. You have to, if you go over a bump, they skip. There was a lot of inconveniences with that solution, even though it was a heck of a lot better than, having a stack of tapes in your car and having a box with a bunch of tapes. And I wanted a way to take my entire CD collection, which was somewhere in the range of 250 plus CDs, and dump it all into my car. So I had all of that at my disposal. And to put a reference on this, radio stations tend to have anywhere between 120 and 250 hours of music at their disposal at any given time, which is why you can listen to the radio and sometimes hear different songs, but that's another story all to itself. So I started working on this project. I started looking at what was it going to take to implement a computer system, basically, that would allow me to play MP3s over the car stereo. And this project started with, again, I had a single board computer, had a couple of other pieces, and I was wanting to develop it. And then life happened, and it never kind of happened exactly as I wanted it to. Technology started to advance. You could get a CD changer or a CD player, like a Sony Discman, that had MP3 playing capabilities. So you just take an MP3 disc and dump it in there. It's just a data drive, and then you can play MP3s off of that. And that worked for a while as well. And fast forward a few years, I lived in New York. I didn't have a car. So this project kind of got shelved. And then I moved across the country, and I got the RX8. And once I had it, I was really stoked. I had a 6-disc changer in the dash. I was really excited. I had an aux input. I could just plug it into my phone, and I had most of the functions and features that I would need or want. Navigation, music, whatever application I wanted to have, it was at my fingertips. I had it available to me. And then this happened. My amp blew up. It decided that it needed to make more deafening noise than I could handle. I almost crashed the car into a post office. It was not cool. But it made me stop and reevaluate. Okay, so the amp is now dead. Replacing the amp is going to cost a pretty penny. The head unit's kind of meh anyway. The Bluetooth functionality was kind of crap. So I was like, what could I do? I didn't have navigation in the car. So what could I do to enhance that functionality and actually put all of those pieces into the car? Because now I've got a dead amp. I'm like, it's kind of forcing my hand. So I was able to sit back and reevaluate this old project that I had milling around in my head for the last half millennia. And it started with just wanting to get audio back into the car, and it's kind of expanded a little bit beyond that. And as it evolves, and as it evolved, and as it I started looking at what other features can I add into it, I started realizing that I really am going to have to go back to the drawing board and figure out exactly what I want and what I'm going to be capable of doing with kind of off-the-shelf parts as a test platform to build out something that's going to be more full-featured than anything I've ever had in a car before. Now I could go out and get an aftermarket radio and just get a head unit, drop in replacement, put it in the dash, and good to go. Except what I found was that most of those radios that you can get now are still operating on technology that's 5 to 10 years old, and that my car is already 10 years old. So why would I want to put something that's the equivalent tech from back then into it now, when there's so much newer and cooler things that I'd want to have additional, cooler features that I want in the car that I didn't have access to back then. So why not why not figure it out? Now I could get one of those aftermarket radios and kind of take it apart and see what I can add and add additional functionality. But if I'm going to start hacking away at one of these aftermarket radios, I might as well just start from ground zero and build it from the ground up. Because at the end of the day, putting in an aftermarket radio is boring. It's already been done. And if I'm going to go the really crazy hard route to add all these features, I might as well just do it myself. So basics things that I want right now that I want to integrate and build into the car is standard run-of-the-mill, get the car audio back up and running, add the navigation functionality with its screen and maybe a touch screen, maybe some knobs and whatnot. I want to get a dash cam and or a backup cam or both and be able to integrate them into it because my car doesn't have either. And then I've contemplated putting in additional functions and features of integrating into the phone, whether it be an Android Auto or something homegrown, and let's go a little crazy with it. This is all being built as like a test dev platform for me because I want to expand this above and beyond what I'm currently capable of doing. And as this project evolves, I'm going to add additional features. I'm going to expand on that. I have a laundry list of ideas that I want to utilize to put into this project. And it's all just a matter of first things first. So let's get started, and we're going to go and check out how we can use the existing wiring infrastructure of the RX8 and integrate the amp into that so I don't have to run a bunch of additional wires yet.
Yes. This is the trunk of the car. And this is the wire harness that used to be in the amp that was right there. Right here. It sat right here attached to the roof of the trunk, or the boot, as you say in England. And this right here, let go! That's not going to, fine. This used to be part of the amp, and I didn't like the amp because it broke. So I removed the wire harness, and now it's here, and we can plug all of this stuff in. So we're going to find, we know that this is power, because it's the big red cable and the big black cable, and we know that that is power inputs. So these two pins here, these two here, would be our power inputs from the outside, from the battery. But then we've got 6 wires here. I'm guessing those are coming from up front, and then these are going to the speakers in the car. We're going to find out by using this thing right here. So let's make that happen. Okay, so back to the wire harness. It's wires and bits. So I took the wire harness that came out of the amp and I went ahead and plugged everything back in. And the goal here is to take this really awesome thing. This is an inductive amplifier, and this is a toner box. I use this toner tracer. It's a 77 HP Tracer 2 from Progressive Electronics by Tempo. I've had this for 1.5 billion years, and I use this a lot in telco stuff. And the goal is you turn it on, and then you hook it up to some wires, and it makes this really annoying sound. And then you go to the far end of wherever the wires are at, where they're connected, and then you go to the other end and you connect them up. So in this case, I should be able to connect a wire, say, to here. So I've connected this up to one of the speaker lines, which means that the speakers are able to take this tone and translate it into sound. And I don't need the inductive amplifier specifically to find those ones, which is what I'm looking for anyway. So we've got 3 different major wire harnesses in here, and I'll count this as a harness, but this is really just the antenna for the radio. We may or may not be able to use that. I'm hoping to be able to use it with concepts of what I'm looking for. That should be functional and usable. We're just going to tuck it back in the back there for a minute. This is a really cool piece of harness here. So these wires are actually running to the control system for the LED that sits up here. It's also all of the steering wheel controls, everything from the Bluetooth all the way down to the volume up and down, and all of those fun things. This harness here is what runs your amp power. The remote activator for the amp power. It's also the left and right, front and rear audio signals that go from the head unit into the back. We're not going to be using those because we have a better idea that we're going to implement. But they are here, and I thought it was kind of interesting that the way this sound system works is that actually the head unit takes in, whatever stereo signal it's coming into, whether it's from a CD, whether it's from the radio, whether it's from the satellite, and then it sends out a 4-channel signal. So front left, front right, rear right. And then the amp in the back actually multiplexes that even further out and sends signals to the tweeters on the doors. It sends signals to the bass speakers, which are 9-inch bass speakers with the amps that they have in the base of the door. And then in the back of the car, there's 2 speakers sitting behind the seat, the back seats. And those are 6x9s. And those are all, it takes 4 channels in and outputs effectively, well, it doesn't do 6 channels out. I mean, it technically is 6 channels, but it's highs and lows for the bass and the tweeters in the door. And that's actually pretty cool, and we're going to find that relatively useful. But I don't like cutting any of these wires. I'd rather use the harness that's in place, because there's no reason to rip the car apart just to replace some wires that are completely functional and usable. Unless we have some major grounding problems or something of that nature, then it gets a little trickier, and we can run some extra wires. Sometimes you're going to have to run wire anyway. Sometimes you run power to the trunk for a higher wattage amp. You may need additional power or at least a larger gauge wire to run to the trunk, but we'll get to that at a later time. So let's go take a look at the amp and why we're swapping it out, or what we're swapping it out for.
I'm only bringing this out so I can show you how much I don't like it, and I really have completely removed it from the car, and I don't plan on putting it back. Ever. It's heavy, it's stupid, it's dumb, it's antiquated. And I don't want to put it back in there. This is the remnants of the amplifier that I pulled out of the trunk. And I say remnants because there's nothing in there anymore. The only piece of this amp that I have left is the wire harness, which I will show you in a minute. But this guy here will still fit into the spot that I removed it, and so I plan on carving out most of the aluminum, adding the wire harness back in here, and putting mounting points so I have just plugs and jacks and things to wire in everything that's going to go in the trunk. Things like this. For the time being, this is the amp that I'll be utilizing in the trunk of the car. I've got the wire harness that came out of the original amp, and I've added a bunch of extra wires here to wire into this kicker. This is an older kicker. I just happen to have it laying around. This is a ZX350.4. It's 2 amps built into one. You can either have it as a fader, so you only plug in a singular input, or you can double it up and put in 4 channels directly into it, or you just do 2. If you do 2, you can have both amps take that input signal, or you can do all 4, and then it will amplify each signal independently, which is kind of what I'm really going for in the long run. But for the time being, it can do either or. It's a little versatile, and I already have it, so it doesn't cost me anything. This guy here was a little bit tricky because I had to go in and tone out all of the wires and figure out where they all went. But I've got the power lines. That one was easy. I just put a voltmeter on it. But then these 3 wires, or these 3 pairs of wires, they go to the rear left, rear right, and the center channel. And then this set of the harness and all of these wires is the front left, front right tweeters, and then there's a front left, front right woofers that are in the door. And those are 9-inch subs, and they have their own inline amps. So that's going to be a little tricky because I need to be able to send the proper signal to them so I don't blow things up. But that's where that's going to go. And you're all probably wondering, what will drive this? If I'm not putting in a third-party head unit, what's going to drive this system? Well, first off, the signal that's going to be going into this amp, and possibly that amp, depending on what happens, this is the Qain Edge 5, or the Edge V. It is a single board computer, no bigger than a Raspberry Pi. It just happens to have a heck of a lot more functionality, complete with a onboard battery, a battery charging system. It's got MIPI ports. It's got an N.2 connection, SD card, USB-C, HDMI inputs. I'm sorry, HDMI output. Network, USB 3, USB 2, the whole 9 yards. It's got everything, including the 40-pin GPIO that you would see in a Raspberry Pi. These little pieces over here are both the Bluetooth and the Wi-Fi antenna. It's a really versatile piece of equipment. It's even got infrared if I wanted to go that route, but I probably won't because this is going to be paired up with a kicker in the trunk. I'm going to get another device, not unlike this, that is going to be built into as a head unit. So I'm going to have a screen, probably running some variation of Android Auto and a few other bells and whistles that I plan on adding to the mix. And it will be sitting in the dash of the car. And then it will send the signal to this edge, which will then multiplex it out. Currently, the the goal is to use this Creative Sound Blaster Audigy 2 NX. It is a USB sound card, and it is got lots of outputs. So not only can I take a fiber optic in and out, but I also have front left, front right, center left, or front left, front right, side left, side right, rear left, rear right, subwoofer, and a center channel. All of this can be outputted from this fancy little device. It does get a little warm, which means I'm going to end up having to use some kind of heat sink to passively remove the heat from this, because when it sits in the car, it's going to get a little toasty. Now that we've toned out all the wires and we know what went where, and we know what went in the head unit, the original stock head unit, based on a wire map or a harness map that we found for the head unit that tells us what wire was supposed to do what coming out of the head unit, but it never had anything for the amp. So we toned everything out. We know where everything is. The next step is going to be installing this amp that I've had lying around, and then getting the single board computer that I've got here integrated with the amp, so we can get some audio back in the car, so I can listen to some music and some audiobooks, and get back into the 21st century instead of driving around in a very silent, mind-numbing car. What am I kidding? I love the sound that car makes. Anyway, if you like this kind of video and you're looking forward to this kind of project or future projects of this kind of nature and some of the crazy stuff that I do around here, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button down below, and make sure you hit the bell so you can get notified of all this new fancy stuff, because I know that that's not exactly the thing that's happening these days. Also, check out me on Twitch. Check me out on Twitter, Instagram, on Facebook. Just look up Deus Qain on all of those fancy platforms. And if you're really interested in this fine, fancy shirt that I'm wearing, check out dermalarmor.com. We'll have hats soon. Until next time, my name is Qain, and I'm here to help you.